feedback we've been getting along the way. And in fact, the community priorities that you see listed here near the bottom of the screen show that, for example, over 24% of the respondents asked that safety and accessibility be something we address throughout the project. That the building, although relatively new, is still a quarter century old at 25, a little over 25 years. And having said that, there are a lot of areas that could be improved for both safety and accessibility.
Right. So, and the second highest priority was the cafe bookstore. And so that we will refer to throughout the rest of the presentation as Starbucks. So the idea is to have some light refreshments while you're in the library. If we do name it Starbucks, we will probably get sued, but we'll work on that later. 14% of people expressed interest in both traditional and non-traditional library programs. So what this means in essence is traditional programs is what you've always thought of a library as doing, okay? Loaning you books, now loaning you movies and CDs and so forth. Non-traditional programs is everything else that libraries have started to do in the last generation, which is quite a few public speaking events, concerts, movies, that sort of thing for people of all ages. And so interest in that. About 10% of people had interest in indoor reading niches. So this means cozy, unique spots where you can kind of spread out, read your material, work on a laptop, that sort of thing. And about 10% prioritized the sort of reinvention or renewal, the word we've chosen to use, of our children's section. Now, there were many other things that community members were interested in, and they are reflected throughout the design. If I read some of these, just kind of, they're maybe a little hard to read for you, but more natural light in the building, more energy efficiency, although we've done in the last 5 years almost everything you can do in a building of this age to increase energy efficiency. Adding character to the building, new finishes, so new carpet, new furniture, that sort of thing. So people expressed interest in that. The other ones I'm seeing are almost all expressed in the major. Here we have 3% of the people that are interested in our art gallery concept. So they expressed they wanted more of that. We're doing that pretty well. 7% wanted makerspace, and that should come up a little bit later on in the discussion. But that's the kind of space where you do 3D printing, sewing machines, video production, that sort of thing. So
we just wanted to point out that the priorities that are listed here weren't simply grabbed out of the air. They're actually a result of an analysis of the various things that came out of the community meetings and discussions. We should also point out that as a whole, library spaces are moving away from that traditional idea or that very basic idea of the library as a transactional space, a space where you come, get something, and leave, versus an experiential space, one that you feel ownership, you spend time there, and you're actually, it's a comfortable space to be. And in fact, you'll see that as a reflection of many of the proposed changes we're talking about are exactly that, a place for the community to be comfortably and for lengths of time. What we're looking at here is an existing conditions plan of the building. This is essentially the entry, which you recognize from a very nice photograph of the entry, as a matter of fact. Into the vestibule and lobby, we have the 2 meeting rooms, and then essentially the library proper right here. There are several defining characteristics of the existing library. The spine that runs down the middle of that is an architectural component that was intended to bring natural light into the space as it was originally designed. We know that the meeting rooms are very successful, and you'll see, in fact, some statistics regarding program usage and the overbooking of the meeting spaces that we do have.
I will just add, this is where we are right now. This is the front lobby, so you came in here. And we'll get more to meeting rooms on a future slide.
Exactly. And we'll talk about each of the individual spaces that we're addressing as well. So the children's space, for example, can be a crowded experience. There are a lot of things that have grown over the last 25 years, not just in footprint, but in noise. If you can imagine the growing noise in a children's space over that period of time, as well as the activities. We actually design children's rooms now, rather than simply saying it's the children's room, we actually sequence it from babies and toddlers to board books to young readers and so forth, to reflect the various ways children learn and their families socialize. Okay, so we thought it would be a good idea to compare
the library from 1992 when it was built to the library today. So that's, I think, 27, 28 years. So the population of Guilderland has gone up by close to 20%, and of course we have another census next year. So we have no idea what that census is going to say for 2020, except that sort of by feel, you kind of have the idea that the community is growing. There's certainly two opinions about what I'm going to say next, but there are certainly a lot of building projects that are proposed for the town of Guilderland, which suggest either that everyone who currently lives here is going to move into a building project, or that more people are going to live here. Registered borrowers is up 25% since 1992. Materials checked out is up 286%. So I just, I'm obviously for this expansion, renovation, renewal. The idea that 286% more items annually are going out of the library may surprise some people. Patrons served is up 185%. This means people visiting the library. So they may visit the library without checking anything out, to go to a meeting, to study, etc. Reference questions answered from 6,300 to 38,000. So almost a 500% increase in people being helped at the library. When, assuming that any of you in the audience is in favor of this enhancement, this renovation, when somebody says, why do we need a library at all in the age of Google, one of my answers is the age of Google makes it harder to find out what's true. And so having someone who's trained in information sources will help you find out what's really going on. Programs offered, last year, as you saw on an earlier slide, we offered 775 with about 24,000 people attending. Why it says very little here is because a generation ago, or two generations, depending on how you measure, the idea of having events in libraries was still a very new idea. So you see how, other than story time, which was a very traditional event, but you see how the use of a library is changing. So now the planners could not have possibly planned for 24,000 adults to attend events here.
Tim, would you mind mentioning as well, these are library programs in this
Right,
chart
right.
we're discussing. The uses of these public spaces are actually
Right.
substantially more than that.
So in addition to those 775 programs, we also had 190 community groups use these two meeting rooms last year. And some of those groups used them at the maximum amount of times that you're allowed to by policy, which is twice a month. So there are some community groups that have nothing to do with the library, but they met 24 times at the library, having 10, 12, 14, 25 people here each time. We do have a number for that, but we haven't found it in time to put it in here. But it's many thousands of people attending those events. Last night, for example, the Guilderland Republican Committee was meeting here, as it does once a month. Another group that's been meeting here that's kind of an ad hoc group is the Guilderland Citizens for Responsible Growth. And another group that's just starting to be here within the last year is called the Norman Skill Strummers. It's a group of about 25 ukulele enthusiasts who get together just to jam. So those kinds of things happen in the library, but they are not reflected in this number at this point.
They're above and beyond.
They're above and beyond that.
If I can interrupt you for just 1 second, one of the things I find intriguing about that as well is that it crosses demographics so significantly. We go literally from babies in libraries and young families and children in programs to the AARP.
Sure.
AARP,
test preparation and defensive driving classes and Red Cross blood drives, those kinds of things are events that are community events happening in the library. Our role is to just let them happen, to make sure they have the microphone they need and so forth, and get out of their way.
So if you took anything from this slide, it's obviously the increased usage in all these areas, but that the actual collection and materials themselves are still pretty important. I mean, that sort of belies a narrative that's out there sometimes that people don't read anymore in these books. And in fact, obviously the materials have diversified in types of things that are offered, but they're still very popular.
Okay, so here we have the proposed new floor plan. So the existing library, roughly, I'm going to draw a line for you in a minute. The existing library is everything to the right of the line that I'm just drawing here. And this is the proposed expansion space. Existing library is 27,500 square feet. and the proposed expansion is 6,400 square feet, so approximately 20% larger. Anything you see in gray is not changing at all. I don't have the benefit, I've only been here since 2010 as a citizen of Gilroy. I don't know about the planning of this building, but the room we're in, we never want to do anything to because it happens to be acoustically perfect. I don't think that it was meant to be acoustically perfect, but
One of those happy accidents.
happy accident, right? So all the gray stuff stays the same. It includes, you're familiar with the women's and men's public restrooms. The main lobby itself will stay the same. Pink spaces are new, different meeting room type things. Blue spaces are the Starbucks and more restrooms that we'll tell you about, and then the new youth center here. One thing I'm going to mention now, just because I'm not quite sure where we mention it later, this is kind of the main adult reading room now, and now instead of being curved, it kind of goes over straight like that. One of the things we want to do, this meeting room is our largest meeting room space, and we routinely have to either decline an event or move it to a school district facility because this room holds a maximum of about 150 people. If this renovation goes through, then all the shelving and seating in this adult area will be mobile. So we can just snap wheels up on it and roll it over this way into this space that's not, that would have permanent shelving. And actually this little section here would also be mobile if it's lighter color. So all the shelving goes over that way, and all of a sudden you've got an event space for 3, 4, maybe even more than 400 people. So because, quite honestly, I'll put it this way, I haven't discussed this phrase with our architect, but those running the library in 2012, got kind of a rude awakening when the public turned down a renovation plan by a 3-to-1 margin that would have added a lot more space. This is a way to add space that already exists. So in a half an hour, and building space is expensive. So in a half an hour's time, you get all this stuff out of the way. You have your Pulitzer Prize winning speaker or your pretty good band, and then you bring it all back. An example I can give from my tenure is New York Mets pitcher and broadcaster Ron Marlin, who originally was slated to go here, and when we moved it to Farnsworth, 575 people came to Farnsworth. So, and even though he just got sick, we're in touch with Ron about coming back because he has a new book. But anyway, the library would not be done by the time he gets back home.
If you'll indulge an architectural conceit as well, that space that Tim's talking about that would then be very flexible in use is actually under that architectural spine we discussed. So it's taking advantage of that high space to make it a public space in other uses. So a very quick walkthrough. We're going to talk about some of the areas in particular, but just to give you an orientation, as we come in the main lobby, instead of going straight through and into the circulation area, we're actually turning left along that spine. So there's an axis that runs from behind this screen, this pair of windows here, and all the way through the building to the windows that are at that end right now, and then actually through the addition and into a bay window on the far side of that. So we're actually going to be entering the building along that axis under that spine. And there's a way of organizing around that space that then makes it flow a little bit better. But it allows us to do some key things from a library perspective. For example, from this lobby, we can lock these doors, and that means that the new meeting room here, the existing meeting room we're sitting in, the side meeting room over here, and Starbucks are all accessible from the main lobby with restrooms, even when the library is closed. Meaning things like used book sales, or blood drives, or other events, or some of the community meetings can take place after hours or on Sunday mornings, or whatever it may be, when the library is not open. That flexibility secures the library as a whole, but makes this much more versatile for the community. Now, we knew that one of the things that came out of the conversation was additional meeting and study spaces was going to be key. So as you can see, this is the medium-sized meeting room that's outside across the hall. We've added another meeting room that's about 2/3 that size as well. So now there are 3 meeting rooms off that lobby. This was carved out of staff space that we've made more efficient in back house space so that the public gains another meeting room. And of course, the Starbucks area will show you some ideas or sketches of what that could be, but add to it that we have study rooms and meeting spaces we'll talk about in more detail, and we really tried to focus on creating those areas that tutoring, quiet study, research and so forth can take place in the building. As we come into the main part of the library, the adult space is this large green area. You know, there are windows along the study rooms and meeting spaces. The teen center forms sort of the core or center of all these other spaces. And then we have the children's space as the addition down here. So that's a general orientation of some of the priorities we have. Right now, the children's space is back here, so by moving the children's space to this location, it allowed us to expand the adult space as well.
Okay. So, Paul, I think it's best for you to lead through the...
You want me to run through this?
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
The existing building right now, this entire footprint is about 27,000 square feet. That's how it was constructed in 1992, give or take, and it hasn't been changed since then. What we're proposing to do is renovate about 20,000 square feet out of that 27,000. So as we said, the gray areas are not being renovated, but all these other spaces see various upgrades, improvements to layout and so forth.
Although, just to point out, the staffing areas that are behind those gray areas, especially right here where I'm circling, almost no changes there with the exception of some new fire safety doors and things like that. So staff are not a priority. I hate to say that, staff, but adding amenities for the staff is really not a focus of this project. So,
right. And then you can see that the addition on this end, about 6,300 square feet, is primarily children's space. So we're renovating 20 out of 27,000 square feet of this space, and we're adding about 6,000. So there's about a 23% increase in the total square footage of the building, significantly smaller than what was proposed back in 2012, I believe.
yes.
But we think it's going to have a terrific impact on the priorities that we've established. Within those spaces, we can look at the individual increases for the areas of priority. So from this plan, which is existing, to the proposed plan, we see that the adult collection increases over 27%. The teen center itself, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah,
What acts as a teen center now?
Right. We have a teen center now, which is 3 pieces of furniture that are arranged to face each other in an area that we carved out sort of between the youth and the adult center. So 7 teens can sit if they all come at the same time and enjoy each other's company. And there's computers in that section and young adult books that are of interest to teens. It's really not a teen center, as I said last year in the Ultima Enterprise. And I think if you ask most Gilderland teenagers, is there a teen center in the library, they would probably say no. If you're out and about and you want to go look at the teen center at the East Greenbush Community Library, you'll see a room. It's about half the size of the room that we're in now. It has, its own entrance and exit, but windows around the side so that we grown-ups can sort of see what's going on in the teen center and so forth. But it gives people, their teens, their own space, which if you're a parent, is important to young people to kind of have a place to call their own. We did have one teen who we had a teen focus group when we were developing the plans about a year and a half ago. And she said, I love the idea of the teen space. I'm going to bring my coffee from the Starbucks over there. But then she said, as far as I'm concerned, the coffee shop is the teen space. And that's what we want. But this place would be decorated, in ways that appeal to young people and so forth, and would kind of give them their own purchase or their own spot in the library. And where is there in the town of Gilderland for teens to go after school and in the evening, where it's relatively safe and certainly wholesome and free? Name that place, and I'll let then I'll tell you we don't need a teen center.
I will say the teens that I interviewed during the design process were some of the most engaged participants in this entire planning process. They jumped right on the idea of a place to be at the library. And not just as a place to hang out, but as a place to do homework, the collaborative learning process that's discussed in school buildings and so forth. It's really an opportunity for them to do things out of the house and in spaces like this. So the Children's Center also grew quite a bit, and that's the Children's Library itself. But in addition to the Children's Center, the program room, those of you who know it's this tiny little space, we should have pictured it a little earlier. has actually grown to reflect the size of the number of families who attend. Because remember, it's not even just the children who are in attendance signed up for the program. It's often siblings, parents, and so forth as well.
So Paul, I'm going to jump in there and
Please.
say, this is the room he's talking about, this blue rectangle over here. It is almost the size of the room that we're in now. We currently have, I think, 5 different story time or music and movement classes for kids. The most well-attended, they're all well-attended, they all take place now in either this room or the Normansville room right over here, because the existing children's room has a fire capacity of 40. We haven't had an attendance of 40 or below in at least 3 years for a children's event. Three Little Birds music and movement activity time takes place twice a week. Took place last Saturday with an attendance of 162 in this room. The building that was built was planned to have a maximum of 40 people. That 162 was pretty close to their average. It's not really an extraordinary statistic. The record attendance added is 196, and the fire capacity of this room is 212. So even by taking the adult space for kids events, we're pretty close to our legal maximum.
And if by chance you're not a parent or a grandparent or a favorite aunt or uncle who brings kids to those programs, consider the fact that whenever they do happen, they are taking up this room, meaning that this room is then not available for other programs that either have to be reshifted or eliminated because there's simply not enough time or room to do them. The other area that we created, and we'll look at these in a little more detail on the larger slide, but there's a new drop-in activity area. This reflects the fact that children learn at different levels and are learning even from the very youngest ages. And so it's not just about the collection of books, although literacy is a key component of children's use of the library, but also things like manipulatives, puzzles, and games and things that children do. And creating a space like that is often very popular with families as a whole. It's literally a drop-in place to come that isn't as structured as a story hour, which might run from 11 to 12, but actually whenever you come in, there are things going on. You want to talk about the meeting?
Sure. Meeting and study rooms is a big thing. So the library currently has 3 study rooms that can be checked out for an hour at a time. One of them is located along this wall right now. In the new plan, there would be 4 as opposed to 3, and there are these green rooms right here. Also, this pink room right here would have a room divider down the middle of it. So at times like Regents or SAT prep finals, we would have 6 study rooms instead of 4. Local history goes from approximately here back over to here, which ironically is where it was located when the library opened in 1992. Seems to be a good spot for it after all. And then this is the cafe lounge space. And I love you, Paul, but we got to speed up. I don't know if these people want to stay here all day. So
terrific. So we'll move on. We're going to look at some of the key areas as we go, but you've gotten an overview of most of the spaces we'll be talking about. So we'll try carefully not to be redundant. We probably should have done them on the larger format. So when we focus on this area, which is the corner of the building we're in, as Tim said, very few change, almost no changes to these. We are adding a door
right
to
here.
this space, which means that performers can now come in at the front of the room rather than having to come down the aisle when different types of events are scheduled.
Also, as
much more professional.
a performer, I can tell you that if the performer happens to screw everything up, they can just escape.
It's easier to get out. Yes. But what that means is this meeting room, for example, can be a green room. So you can have the preparation and waiting area here and then come in without coming through the back of this space. But as we said, this is a new meeting room, so this is a fairly large one. So we have large, medium, and small. We've hit all the Goldilocks things we had to. We've added a family restroom in this corner of the building so that we're not designating male and female, but actually oftentimes parents of a child who has a disability, for example, or parents with multiple siblings have to go in and change one child. This is a much more convenient situation than gang restrooms as they are now.
And when we get to other parts of the building, there are 4 more such restrooms throughout the building.
Right. And so as you see, we have access to these 3 plus the Starbucks space that's off the lobby as well. This is what these spaces look like now. They're often crowded enough that people attending an event are actually out into the lobby.
We were hoping today's attendance would be like that, maybe tonight at 6:30. So.
This, you can see the opening into the new space along that spine that I was talking about. Architecturally, it sort of lays out right along that axis, and makes a lot of sense. And it brings us into the adult area. So as you come into that space, a new circulation desk, which has cross-reference to the help desk, the sight lines can be seen because these are all mobile stacks, as we discussed. Meaning it's a safe library because staff can help each other and oversee each other, but it also means that we don't have to increase the number of staff to man the building, to operate the building by a single staff person.
One of the things that, in my opinion, caused the 2012 referendum to fail is that community and the newspapers kept asking the director how many staff would need to be added to staff that additional 12,000 square feet that they wanted to build. And the answer was, we don't know, we have to wait and see how the community uses it. And in retrospect, what that meant is, to some voters, why don't you go ahead and sign a blank check? And so we have made the commitment in the process here that we are adding 0 staff members as a result of this renovation if it passes.
Exactly. And there are key areas that you see. It's not just about collection, but there are tall and low stacks. There are seating areas. There are specific spaces and technology that tie to the mission of the library as a whole. And as we discussed earlier, there is an increase because the children's space moved of 27% in the adult spaces of the library. This again is looking down that spine, that space that we discussed earlier. And this is a sketch of what that may be then. So we have lower stacks, better sight lines, new and popular display, take advantage of the height of the spine. This is an example from another library we've done where we tried to introduce more warmth and architectural texture with the light fixtures and the wood finishes and so forth that make it a little less institutional and more of a space to be and stay. We know psychologically blues and greens are soothing colors, for example. We can pick up on a lot of these ideas to make it a pleasant space to be.
Okay, so we would have a redesigned circulation desk here. We have made a movement a little bit towards self-checkouts. We still believe that the human interaction is the way to go, but we put 3 self-checkout machines into the library within the last, I'd say 15 months, and they are handling about a quarter of all circulation. And there is an element to library circulation that is sometimes a little bit confidential. So sometimes people are checking out material that they really don't necessarily want to share with the clerk. So that might be one reason that self-check is somewhat popular. The other is that it's kind of growing in society. Like when it came to Home Depot and Hannaford and Price Chopper, I wasn't interested. And then once I got into a line one day that was too long, I got interested. So my approach is to use whatever's going to get me done the most quickly.
We've shown some examples here at the top of the screen as well of other spaces that we've created that are like these focus areas, comfortable places to be. Small groups even meet there, knitting clubs, for example, or ways to feature access to natural light, as is the curve along the outdoor plaza area.
I hope those of you in attendance know that there is a beautiful garden behind the library, but not everybody knows it. And so this kind of a seating feature, in addition to being cozy nook type space, would give us access to those windows.
Right. And actually make it a feature, right?
Yes.
In this library, it's the main intersection in this small village in upstate New York, but here it would actually be on this garden area.
Okay.
This is one of the key things we wanted to focus on.
Right, so here is the Starbucks space, and if like a key thing to this is that it would be outsourced. It could be outsourced in one of 3 ways we've thought of, and there may be other ways. But the first is to rent it to an existing building and have them operate it. And if you're operating a coffee shop, you probably don't want to open it at 9:30 in the morning when we open. You probably want to open it at 6 or 7. So we've allowed for that in the design of this area. The second way to outsource this thing, let me mention the first way, is a potential revenue opportunity for the library. So some people do have difficulty wrapping their mind around the concept of a food service in a library. It is growing coast to coast. There has been a cafe in the Saratoga Public Library for about 25 years, and If you walk downtown Saratoga, you know that there's probably 75 restaurants within 6 or 8 blocks of that cafe, but it's been there for 25 years, so there is a market for it. The other two models we've discussed are, we're very much fans of Puzzles Cafe in downtown Schenectady, where the mission is to employ people who are on the autism spectrum. So we'd love to create an opportunity like that with Puzzles or with the ARC or with one of the other human service agencies in the area. And the third way is to speak with BOCES or the Guilderland School District and try to get an entirely student-run operation where students do everything from plan the menu to do the cash accounting and all that sort of stuff. So those are the 3 models we've thought of for the cafe.
And one thing I would just mention very quickly, imagine that you are a family with young children in a program. One of the keys to having a space like that in the library is actually to make sure the family will be there for a while. After a story hour, often children want to go get a snack. If you leave the building in a suburban environment like this, it's less likely that you're actually going to come back. We want them to be here as long as possible. We want to expose them to the collection and the other resources the library has to offer. And if providing an amenity like that means they spend more time here, all the better.
And you know, anybody who's been to a Barnes & Noble knows that there is a good combination of reading and eating and drinking.
You want to comment on these?
Absolutely. Well, these are the study rooms I mentioned before, so we'd be going from 3 to 4 permanently, and then this is the room that's divisible down the center for busy times. Other times it's a small meeting room. Local history back where it originally was in 1992. And just in case anyone misunderstands, we're not selling new books here. We're selling books that have been donated to the Guilderland Public Library. Currently, without the dedicated space, we're able to bring in $25,000 a year. If we could up that to $40,000 a year, it would be 1% of our annual budget. And we think that this would be able to help us with that.
As a means of improvement.
Yep.
Right. So we can look at the numbers, and you see that meeting and study rooms, which were a high priority, have increased by 28% when we add them all up. And one of the keys is how they lay out with access, as we talked earlier, to the lobby or to restrooms to make them as flexible in use as possible. Currently, meeting rooms are simply overcrowded. We actually tape the floor to make sure we keep people behind the line.
So
these are those numbers.
Those are those numbers we discussed earlier. And
they don't include community.
Right. So.
Okay. This is an example of what that Starbucks space might look like: cafe, high tables, internet cafe, if you will, comfortable space to be. It might include music. I mean, it really can be almost anything. And over time, it can shift. It's a flexible enough space. We're not putting a commercial kitchen in it, for example, that dictate that it has to be one certain thing. It might shift over time.
Okay, so here we have our teen center and also 2 of our single-family restrooms, excuse me. And right outside of the teen center, we have the adult help desk, which Paul mentioned earlier, has a sight line over to the front entryway and to the circulation desk. So our staff can see each other and communicate with each other that way. One thing I'll mention, I'm getting ahead of myself, but the youth reference desk is right here. So anyone concerned that the teens might be up to all sorts of hijinks, there's a window here, there's a window here, there's a door here, and there's a window here. So we can give our teens a sense of their own space while also knowing that they're safe. So.
And we're also focusing on a few of the key areas. We talked about seating spaces and so forth, and locating technology in proximity to a help center, that is, people who need assistance with computers and printing and so forth. So the teen center, as we talked earlier, increased 103% from the space that it currently has allocated. This is an example of the entrance to the children's center, the teen center to the right. This is another teen space that we did at another location, but you get a sense of the flexibility. These are mobile, they can be shifted, the tables and study tables, and seating can all be rearranged depending on the group and what they're doing in the teen space. Some other teen spaces, this is the space you have now. As Tim said, it's a few pieces of furniture carved out of where there used to be some stacks. This is one in another library. Note, for example, docking stations for recharging phones and iPads, technology, and in fact, they have very specific times when it's a quiet space for studying and homework assistance and moves into more social events at different times of the day, but a variety of seating, a variety of different opportunities.
And on a school day at 11 in the morning, it's available as a meeting room space.
That's right, that's right. But at 3, you better be out there. It gets crowded quickly. This is an example of those reading spaces we were talking about, or the idea of niches, quiet little spaces that you can find that are your own, or places that you are comfortable sitting and spending time studying and doing research, and there aren't people walking by you or over your shoulder. Currently, these are the spaces that exist in the library, which are simply arrangements of sort of box chairs, but we're trying to create a more flexible and dynamic space.
This one in particular, if you spend a lot of time here, is, you know, people do resort to these chairs, and gratefully so, but they're in a hallway essentially. You know, you cross your legs and then you have to pull your foot back because people are walking by or wheelchairs going by.
And anybody going through the stacks is coming by you on your left and right all the time. It's actually a very difficult place to be comfortable. So one of the highlights has been the children's space. And remember, there was children's area when we talked about priorities, but also the program, which is a reflection of children's activities and what happens in the library. So this space, which we enter here, has a children's help desk here, has technology nearby, quiet study spaces, and then as we get to this end of it, it's the noisier end. So we have family restrooms, one off the space, one into the program room, a large program room, which, as Tim mentioned, is almost as big as the space we're in, a little bit smaller, and then the drop-in activity area. So quiet to noisy is the sequencing. We've created some niches, places to be and surround that are your own, and some feature areas. So how will this look? We can see that the program space, this increased 62% from what's there now. There's no drop-in activity space now. That's a new space that's here. And then the children's space itself grew by 38% to make this happen. It might look something like this. We come in, the desk is on your right. You can see through the glass into the program room up here. You can see through the openings into the drop-in play area. Shelving is all low. Technology is accessible, easy to supervise all the space. And then these are some of those reading niches. This is a similar space with low furnishings and sight lines and colors that allow for a peaceful children's space. This is what we have now in terms of the children's program area.
So this is the room I referred to earlier, built in 1992 with a fire capacity of 40. You could see when you get 40 in there, it isn't exactly the safest spot that you might imagine. And this is the room that, you know, if this were the only room we had, we couldn't have a story time with 162 people in it. Just can't have it.
Not enough princess room. These are some examples of other children's spaces that are open and light. They allow children to move around. I mean, that is a part of their existence, of course, is that flexibility. But spaces that are calm, technology that's accessible, gives room to actually do work as opposed to crowding a lot of things together. This is the existing technology in the children's. This is an example of another one. And then even things to engage children's imagination. So this is the drop-in activity area in another library with manipulatives, puzzles, things like that, that even toddlers and babies will pick up and play with or crawl on the cushions on the floor. But it can often be a very engaging space. So we picked up on some of the rural aspects of the town of Gilgal and in thinking of some themes. This is looking into the drop-in activity area and looking into the program space. Here's an example of one of those niches that, again, they're done in a playful way. This is one we did in another location that picks up on the local history of the area. So working with the children's staff, we actually discussed at length the ideas and themes of what the town of Gilderland is about.
So this would be the outdoor seating area right outside of Starbucks. I think you see about 4 to 6 tables here, nice landscape trees, seating wall all the way around. This would be in this grassy area here and partly in an area that's not in the photo. I know we have at least one fireman in the audience, and we can't take away the fire lane. We want to be able to save people if there is a fire, so it would be over here a little bit. One of our fundraising ideas is to sell the paver bricks that could be on these up and down walls to help defray costs for not just building this space, but future maintenance. So that would take place here and maybe at a few other spots throughout the building. One thing we can see happening here is a little acoustic guitar type performance, whether it's something we're sponsoring or whether somebody just shows up with their guitar and plays. That's the kind of thing you wouldn't really want in the library, but outside the library it might just be very festive. So.
And part of the idea is to show activity outside of the building too. The building right now is very inwardly focused, and unless you knew what was happening here, you wouldn't even get a sense necessarily that it was a civic building. But by having activity and lounging space outside of that building, we can actually show what's happening and that there's activity going on. Right now, there are several safety issues related to the parking lot. As an example, if you park in a handicapped spot, you actually have to then maneuver through the drive areas of the parking lot to get to the main entry. Another example, many of you have probably faced the bottleneck at the book drop because it's located right at the main entry to the curb cut to the library. So we've actually talked about rearranging the entire front of the library site in such a way that Mercy Care Lane and Western Avenue are this curb cut here. But as you know, the town has worked diligently, and we have been discussing with them the importance of creating another connection to Western Avenue by going out to Winding Brook, so that people, particularly turning left in this situation, doesn't create that kind of bottleneck. But what we've done is make the drive in one way. We've actually moved the book drops over to this location, meaning the bottleneck is only here rather than the main entry to the library. And this is also then a shorter distance for staff to go and retrieve the carts from the book drop. This peninsula that runs down the center means that folks who are using the handicapped parking spots can get out of their vehicle, come onto a protected walkway, and then only cross at the narrow spot here where there's a crosswalk, rather than maneuvering through the paved area and hoping to get to the front of the building. We have electric charging stations. There's a grant that's available actually to help fund those improvements in technology. And then we've also taken the spot up on the hill. There's two adjacent pieces that are owned by the library to create an overflow parking up here. So we've actually gone from 136 existing spaces to 173 after this is done, and created a safer connection to the main part of the building. You see the access all the way from Western Avenue right up to the entry gable.
And I'm just going to jump in here and say that you have to have an elevator speech when you run a library in this day and age. And I put myself out there, but my elevator speech is, you are always driving on Western Avenue. So if you start looking at our parking lot, most of the time you'll see that it's pretty full, sometimes completely full. And so that's my answer. I mean, I can go into greater detail with other audiences about why we need libraries in this day and age, but we need them because people use them. It's one
I got a quick question.
Sure, Howard.
You said it was one way going in, how do you get out?
It loops around and back out.
Oh, so it's two-way.
Well, it's one way on this aisle.
Yeah, I
And
get
then one way through here, and then this is two-way, this is two-way, and you get out that. Right.
Yep.
Okay. And the existing staff parking, this remains as is, but this is all new parking here. We see that connection to Winding Brook means a safer traffic light access.
So folks, I live over off 146, like sort of way over here. So when I leave the library, I drive right out here, drive right over here. The town has been kind enough to trim back a lot of vegetation here. I go right over here to the stoplight, I turn left, and it is faster on average than sitting here and trying to turn left. It's also much safer. You know, somebody may ask, the state refuses to put a stoplight there, and really, quite frankly, until there's a major loss of life, they will probably continue refusing to put a stoplight there. One thing we could do, if you could go back to the parking lot slide, Paul, is the town is about to take over Mercy Care Lane along here to the back of Our Lady of Mercy. That's currently privately owned by St. Peter's, but they're giving it to the town. And one thing the town has discussed is that to help alleviate this problem of people turning left, to put a right turn lane right in here, so that if you're going to turn right, you don't have to wait behind the left turner for quite as long. I'm meeting with the town supervisor on Thursday for an update on that project. And we'll continue to advocate for what was their idea in the first place, but a right turn lane there should help quite a bit.
Just a quick list of bullet points of other things throughout this project that would also increase safety. If you recall, that was one of the key areas of concern. So Western Avenue access was one. Through the course of this project, the entire building will add fire sprinkler protection, which is now a requirement of the New York State Building Code, but also exponentially increases the safety of the building for staff. And
So back,
patrons.
I'm going to jump in. Back in 1992, the prevailing theory in building a library was preserve that collection, which is worth several $100,000. You don't want a false alarm spraying water all over it. Today, the prevailing thought is the people in the building are irreplaceable, the patrons and the staff. A lot of the people are below 5, and a lot of the people are over 60, 65. It might be hard for them to get out of the library building, so a sprinkler system can buy you a little bit of time. Just in case anybody is asking, we would not sprinkler the local history material because it's rare, unique, and can't be replaced, so we don't want that to get wet. I hope I don't sound cavalier, but a few $100,000 worth of books can be replaced, but a single person cannot be replaced. And it's now code to have a sprinkler in the building.
The book drop location we discussed for improving safety to both staff and people using the book drop, patrons. The accessible parking is a much better situation. The entry surface right out front is now pavers, but they have various edges and lips that can be a tripping hazard. The restroom locations increases safety because families can now use them near the space they are at the library without having to get up and leave the space or leaving a laptop or worse, leaving a child in one space while you go to another. The staff sight lines, we've thought very carefully through the entire space. There are additional emergency egress. The New York State Building Code requires egress for the purposes of fire safety. We've actually gone beyond the New York State Building Code requirements for exit doors because of the other types of events that can happen in public spaces, so that there are ways to escape the building if necessary. And then lastly, lighting improvements throughout the building. There's a quantity of light throughout the building that's well established in most places, aside, ironically, from the large print collection. But in most other spaces, it's adequate. But the quantity of light isn't as much in question as the quality of light. Improving the natural light and improving even the artificial lights in spaces make them more comfortable and easier on the eyes, less glare on computers and screens.
And less expensive to run.
Yes,
Exactly.
the expensive part has already been done, but if you look at our main adult area where the books are shelved, the lights run this way, the shelves run this way, and the lights run this way. And I'm not quite sure what they were thinking in 1992, but it doesn't help you when you're going to read the shelves. If the light was right over you, you'd be in good shape, but it's perpendicular to you. So stuff like that needs to be worked on.
So overall, as we said, this is sort of a summary of the overall project. These were some of the priorities. We think we've hit just about all of them, and several of the ones that were in the pie charts you saw that didn't even hit the 10% number. From a materials collection, the children's materials space, or the collection itself, grows 8.4%. The teen materials grow 38%. The adult materials grow over 10%. And seating throughout the library grows over 57%. All things that came up in the public discussions.
Very good. Nothing to add.
So essentially, this is the existing building, the addition. You see where the renovation areas are. You see the priorities we tried to accomplish. And that's a quick, believe it or not, a quick summary of really a 1.5 long process of getting design ideas into something that would work for this community.
Can I just hit the high points here, and then if people have specific
Please.
questions about finance, we can entertain them. So the overall project is $8.3 million. We are putting $1.4 million of capital reserve into it. So since the referendum lost in 2012, we've been basically socking away money to defray the cost of building improvements. And keep in mind that we've also done a lot of building improvements in the last 5 years. So we have a new roof, a new loading dock, LED lighting, and have almost completely revamped our HVAC system. So this whole project would probably be about, I'm going to say about $1.5 million more if we hadn't done those things in the last 5 years. The referendum, when you take 1.4 away from 8.3, you get 6.95 million. So that's the amount that is on the question that will be on the ballot on May 21st. And then we also have a recommendation from Assemblymember Pat Fahey that the state give us $250,000, $250,000 towards this. Our foundation and friends are still working on what they may be able to give us towards the project. New York State Division of Library Development construction grants. Every year when you're working on a project like this, which sounds a little scary but could take up to 3 years to complete, you can apply for a portion of it to be paid back to you from New York State, but you can't count any of those chickens before they're hatched. So you may ask, and you'd be justified in asking, why do you have $1.4 million on hand? One of the reasons we have that on hand is that for the New York State Library construction grant, let's just say that we were going to do a $700,000 HVAC project. We don't need to do it because we've already done it. But let's say we were going to do that. We have to tell state ed, we have to prove to state ed that we have $700,000 on hand before we can apply for the grant. Sounds a little counterintuitive, but they want to not give their grant money to somebody who won't be able to complete the project. So they make you show that you already have the money that you need. Welcome to New York. But anyway, it requires you then to keep a little bit of cash balance.
That's a very important part of, a very important component of this layout is that 1.4 million allows the library to apply for grants that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do because the money that comes from the referendum cannot be used as the match. So in putting money away for a rainy day to fix these things and do these upgrades, it actually gives us more flexibility to supplement that money through grant writing.
Yep. And then so the impact per $100,000 of assessed value for taxpayers. So let's say your house was worth exactly $100,000. If the project was financed for 15 years, it would cost you $14.90 a year. If financed for 20 years, $12.30 a year, and if financed for 25 years, $10.60 a year. The project is not going to be funded by the school district until this time next year, okay? We don't need the money because we're not going to break ground anytime soon. So the school district will be borrowing the money about this time next year if our voters approve it. We believe they are likely to go for the 20-year figure. In essence, the school district, when they borrow money, usually goes for the 15-year figure, and they do that on the theory that at the end of 15 years you will have paid less back. The library came to the school district and said, we're interested in the 25-year figure because we want the impact to be very low on the taxpayer in any given year. And the likely compromise position is the 20-year. So if your house is worth $300,000, that'd be $36.90 a year. And on some of the handouts that you see, we have the saying less than $1 a week, which is what the $300,000 house would be. So, but we can't really know until the school district takes that action a year from now. This is a sample of an FAQ sheet. This actually is available on tables in the back. I saw that some of you were reading it. Thank you. As you were waiting for the program to start. The one you picked up looks a little bit different just because we've been changing it day to day as we've been going along. I've been speaking to a lot of community groups and just creating the paper has taken us a little bit of time. One reason for that is when we lost in 2012, we were roundly criticized for spending somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000 to hire a public relations consultant to help us get the project passed. So this time around, we did not hire a public relations consultant. We're using our existing staff in order to do that. And we also happen to have a new person in this position. So not only is she learning her job and doing an excellent job, but she's got a referendum on top of that. So we're not hiring a fancy firm to tell you how you should vote. We're just trying to tell you what we would like to do. So that's our FAQ sheet, but the one you picked up looks a little different. And we just want to remind you to vote on May 21st at your local elementary school. Polls are open at 7 in the morning until 9 p.m. On the school district website, and I'm not sure if we've moved it over to our website yet, But there are 4 key pieces of information. Who's eligible to vote? How do I register to vote? Where do I vote? And how do I get an absentee ballot? So those 4 things are on the budgets and voting section of the school district website. And I think it's time for questions, correct?
It is, absolutely.
Howard, hand up first.
I don't want to get up. It's more
Okay.
fun.
Stretch those legs.
I have a number of opinions. One, this program is absolutely necessary. 2, it gives us more bang for our buck. 3, the interest rates are still low. They're not going to stay there. And I was disappointed in 2012 because frankly, the interest rates were almost zero at that time, and we would have really made out. Someone who was insane sent out 20 mailings in 2012 and phone calls and everything. And I think a lot of people thought to themselves, there must be some minutes for somebody that didn't sound fair, okay? Didn't sound right. I've got to say, this library is the best login in my life. I don't know about the rest of you. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Howard. The one thing I would add to that before we get to you, sir, is that last night I met with the Gilderland Republican Committee, who meet in the library, and they said to me, when was the last time you went to Bond? And it was a question that kind of took me a little bit by surprise, and I had to think for a second. And the last time this library asked the public to bond on its behalf was when it was built in 1992. That particular member of the Gilderland Republican Committee was swayed by that. He said, I think that's all you have to tell people is, they don't ask you to borrow money all the time. It's once in a generation. Yes, sir.
You try to project, based on future growth of Gilderland, at what point this expansion would be insufficient?
We have not yet tried to do that, but it raises 2 things. Your question makes me think of 2 things. One is that 2020 is a census, so we will know what our population is after the 2020 census, and it'll be different than it is now, and I suspect larger. The other thing is, I'm wondering whether I should say this, but I'm going to say it, okay? With 3 large residential complexes planned within walking distance of the library, if those are all approved, for the first time since this library was opened in 1992, there'll be a way to get here that doesn't involve an automobile, okay? And so there will be potentially 200 units in the Winding Brooks Commons development. It's downsized recently from 280 to 200. And there are 2 more, I don't know if you could bring up the map, but there are 2 more proposals, one for, not the map, but the aerial shot. Okay, so Winding Brook Commons would largely be in this area here with 200 residential units. There's another one over here that has about 65 units. And then there's one right about here that is a fascinating one to me. It's the intergenerational community where they want to serve 3 populations, people over 55, people who are families who are fostering, and people who are young adults who are on some sort of special needs situation. And this is about 60 units as well. So, and there's sidewalks planned for all of this, okay? So the library here, in addition to that, the town is interested in putting right along here a pedestrian and biking trail. And they have a grand vision that goes from Altamont all the way over, I don't know where exactly you put it, but the Hudson River, so that you'd be able to bike from one place to another through Voorheesville, through Bethlehem, Del Mar, and all the way to the Hudson River. So I'm excited as a library director that you'd be able to walk to my library. Plus there are sidewalks planned. The Hiawatha is probably right about, is it Fairview? Which one am I trying to think of? They all kind of sound the same. Regency Park is probably right about here. So you've probably all had the experience of seeing families walking along here, carrying groceries sometimes, strollers. There are going to be sidewalks there, but because they're on a federal grant, the town is having a harder time getting them done than if they had done a state grant or some locally funded. So in the enterprise 2 weeks ago, Peter Barber said likely next spring with a slight chance of this fall for those sidewalks. So to get back to your original question, there is a part of me that believes this renovation would not be large enough. But there's also a part of me that knows that this renovation is almost exactly half the square footage we asked for in 2012, and almost exactly half the price we asked for in 2012. And we didn't pass in 2012 when we asked for 12,000 square feet and $12.9 million. So now we're asking for 6,000 square feet and $6.9 million. So this may be the largest renovation that our community would be willing to vote for. And, you know, it'll be better than no increase would be one of my answers to that. But frankly, over the long term, I am concerned that this renovation itself would not be big enough. I hope that somebody else has the privilege of being director at some future time when the library tries to get bigger again after this. Does that answer your question?
If I may, let me add a few points from the architectural perspective there, because it's an excellent question. One of the things I get asked to speak about at the New York Library Association and other venues is what is the future of libraries, and it's a question a lot of people are trying to ask. If you had noticed in the floor plans, one of the key components is that there are actually very few partitions being built into the design of the library. And what that means is we are trying to maintain maximum flexibility of the space so that as the nature of collections change, I'm trying to get back to a floor plan here, as the nature of the collections change, we still have large open spaces that we can work with, meaning in the future, yes, it may very well be that DVDs disappear, for example, if streaming becomes so popular that they don't happen anymore. But we can shift things, including creating meeting space, like the idea we talked about under the spine, so that we can keep moving things around in this shell game within the building as long as we keep it flexible. You heard us talk about mobile shelving to allow us to change the nature of spaces even on a temporary basis. That obviously works in the long term too. So as we see trends changing over time, we can continue to adapt to population increases, collection changes, and so forth. It's an excellent question. Is there going to be enough meeting space? If they keep offering excellent programs and so many people keep coming to it, that's always going to be an issue, but in a way it's a good issue to have, if you will. So excellent question.
Any follow-up to it? Any other questions? So if there are no other questions, thank you very much for coming. Make sure you pick up a copy of the paper on your way out. We did that in just an hour. Thank you. Please vote on May 21st. It's against the law for me to say please vote yes. So please vote either way on May 21st. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here.
And I'm around, and Paul's around if any of you have.
There are some boards in the back, so you can get closer up to the plan if you'd like to look at them. It's exactly this slide, in fact, are right in the back of the room if you'd like to look at those. And your FAQ sheet should have some more information for you. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. I tried to make the